So it is a growth-oriented budget. We see stronger growth coming over a period of time.
Okay. You spoke about the focus on infra capex and of course the resultant effect on manufacturing and MSME out there. But we'd also like to understand from you how does the industry see in terms of the potential for investment or growth in other areas where the government is giving a lot of push. For example, in agriculture, in rural areas, when we talk about developing storage capacity, digital in agri, which the Prime Minister also mentioned about, and let's not forget the green aspect of the budget, focus on green energy and various other green issues which the budget focuses on.
So, one of the things which has started happening over a period of time in the last few years is a way to see how government and industry can work together towards taking India to a more developed economy. Projects which will be done together. There is a private-public partnership of a kind that we are seeing, and therefore opportunities for the private sector to participate in areas of rural infrastructure, in terms of in the rural economy, especially through digital, where there can be much more of private sector intervention, technology which can be brought in. The scope of investments coming in for the upliftment of people. The digital story of India, say, for instance, to say as to how it has actually touched the common man and given an inclusion. Rather included the private sector to help and to participate and invest are very, very important stories for which India's growth story is strong. So I see much more investments coming from the private sector into core areas, be it manufacturing or into other areas. There will be so much of opportunities in areas like drones, say, for instance, and even in tech, in different tech areas. So I see this budget to be a budget where private sector investments could be pretty strong, and not only Indian private sector investment. I see India becoming a strong destination for foreign direct investments to come in. India is already a sweet spot, but through these making matters simple was something very important. We have seen focus on decriminalization. We have seen focus on ease of doing business. So all of this makes it a very attractive destination for Indian industry as well as for the global industry to be working here.
Okay, indeed. So there are a lot of avenues, as you're pointing out, when we're talking about the application of technology in various sectors as well. Thank you so much, Mr. Banerjee. We also have with us Mr. Adil Shetty, who's joining us. He's the co-chair of FICCI FinTech Committee and also the co-founder and CEO of bankbazaar.com. Mr. Shetty, when we're talking about application of technology, of course, in terms of fintech sector, what were the expectations, and where do you or the fintech industry analyzes various aspects of this budget? That's one part. But the other more important part, as I was asking Mr. Banerjee as well, the application of technology to newer areas, newer domains as well.
Yeah, absolutely. We've been talking a lot about the 10 lakh crore capex push for physical infra. But if you notice, the FM spent about 5 minutes talking about digital public infra. And she emphasized, right, how UPI payments now are over 700 billion digital payment transactions in India per year. Here are the key aspects she touched upon. She spoke about simplified KYC, saying that Digital India needs a push. All financial regulators will look at simplified KYC. She spoke about DigiLocker, very unique global platform. 128 million Indians have a DigiLocker account. She said all document types will be integrated into DigiLocker for easy sharing. She said to ease credit, one-stop verification of address using DigiLocker and Aadhaar. And she spoke about 3 centers of excellence for artificial intelligence. I think the messaging is very clear. Digital public infra, digital development is an opportunity for India to leapfrog. If you look at yesterday's economic survey, what was said in it is that Indian GDP can rise by 1% if we are able to harness the benefits of digital public infrastructure. So big thrust on digital infra as they have given a thrust to physical infra.
बिल्कुल हमारे साथ डॉक्टर महेश गुप्ता भी जुड़ गए हैं, सीएमडी हैं केंट आरो के। एक रिएक्शन बजट को लेकर उनसे भी लेते हैं। डॉक्टर गुप्ता, शुक्रिया हमारे साथ जुड़ने के लिए, बातचीत के लिए। आप अपने नज़रिए से बताइए, आपकी इंडस्ट्री को क्या मिला है भारत में कंजम्पशन के लिहाज से, और साथ ही जब हम एक्सपोर्ट को लेकर बात करते हैं, क्या हासिल हुआ है बजट में?
बहुत अच्छा बजट आया है। इंडस्ट्री में देखें तो खासकर एमएसएमई को बहुत फायदा मिला है इस इंडस्ट्री के अंदर। एमएसएमई के अंदर एक लोन्स 2 लाख करोड़ के लोन्स एक्स्ट्रा एमएसएमई को मिलने वाले हैं। एमएसएमई में 3 लाख तक के टर्नओवर के ऊपर एक इनकम टैक्स के लिए आपको कोई अकाउंट्स रखने की जरूरत नहीं है। एमएसएमई को पैसे एकदम से मिलेंगे उनके लिए। अगर आपने एक बड़ी कंपनी ने अगर उनसे ट्रांजैक्शन किया, अगर पैसा उन्होंने नहीं दिया उस कंपनी का, तो उसको वो एक्सपेंस नहीं क्लेम कर सकते हैं। तो एक एमएसएमई इंडस्ट्री को बहुत अच्छा ग्रोथ मिलने वाला है इस बजट से। जहां तक एक्सपोर्ट की आप बात कर रहे हैं, एक्सपोर्ट हम लोग का फॉरेन करेंसी के डिमांड के ऊपर ज्यादा डिपेंडेंट होता है। अभी इस वक्त इंटरनेशनल लेवल सिचुएशन खराब है। यूएस के अंदर हम लोग देख रहे हैं बहुत फायरिंग हो रही है लोगों की। यूरोप के अंदर अभी पोजीशन खराब है, गैस की पोजीशन की वजह से डिमांड कम है। तो मैं एक्सपोर्ट में तो कोई ज्यादा बेनिफिट नहीं देख रहा हूँ, बट इंडस्ट्री पॉजिटिवली हो रही है। दूसरा सबसे इंपॉर्टेंट पॉइंट ये है कि डिमांड जनरेशन होगा इस बजट से। हर एक व्यक्ति को और हर एक ऑर्गेनाइजेशन को कुछ ना कुछ बेनिफिट मिला है इस बजट के अंदर से। इनकम टैक्स का एग्जम्पशन हो, चाहे हायर इनकम ग्रुप के लोगों का एग्जम्पन हो, उनकी भी एक रेट ऑफ टैक्सेशन कम किया गया है। तो हर एक आदमी के हाथ में एग्रीकल्चर के अंदर कुछ मिला है, और आपको आवास योजना में पैसा खर्च करने को मिलेगा। तो वो सारा पैसा जब लोगों के हाथ में आएगा तो डिमांड जनरेशन होगी, और डिमांड जनरेशन होगी तो इंडस्ट्री पूरी रिवाइव होती है और ग्रोथ स्टोरी उसकी बढ़ती है। आने वाले समय में मैं समझता हूँ इससे जो हम लोग का 7% का ग्रोथ है, ये धीरे धीरे बढ़ता ही चला जाएगा। ये सही इफेक्टिव तरीके से इम्प्लीमेंट हुआ।
ओके।
और आइए अब थोड़े से और रिएक्शन सुन लेते हैं। बजट के बाद क्या रिएक्शंस रहे हैं संसद भवन के अंदर, आइए सीधा आपको सुनाते हैं।
I think about fiscal deficit and the GDP was very well and nicely placed by the Honorable Finance Minister. She did show up the plan step by step. We are very happy the middle class has got that support, which has always been spoken but not done. And this government showed it that they are here as with Saptarshi for every class, every caste and every gender.
Oh, that's great for the common man. And I think that it's a historical move as well. And I'm sure, I think people from a middle class will definitely benefit from this.
It is helpful for the middle class and the poor section of our society.
Look, some of those things are good. I'm not going to be completely negative, but I have still some questions. There was no mention of Manrega. What are we going to do about the poor rural labour? There was no mention of unemployment. There was no mention of inflation. So there are a number of questions still. There's some good things in the budget, I don't deny that. And I certainly found myself applauding when they created a new digital library for children around the country.
I want to thank Honorable Prime Minister Narendra Modi ji and Nirmala Sitharaman ji for the massive announcement of the 5,000 crore rupees project for the Upper Bhadra irrigation project. From a very long time, many North Karnataka districts were struggling for even drinking water. This project is going to be a game changer. I thank the Honorable Prime Minister for this very important announcement on behalf of the people of Karnataka.
Comprehensive, all-encompassing, from farmers to women entrepreneurs, to fishermen, to tribal, to digital, what not. An exemption to the middle class in a very big way, from rubber planters to sugarcane growers to cooperative to skilling. As I said, and above all, the exalted, respectable name given to Shri Anna, Ragi, Bajra, Jawar. That is the true vision of the Prime Minister. My greetings, respect to him. Sabka Saath, Sabka Vikas is what this budget speaks for.
Definitely, there's been a benefit for the taxpayer in general, right from the lower slabs onwards and even to the higher slabs. And every time we've seen this in the past, it's improved tax compliance. So I expect that in spite of the reduction in tax rates, that there will be increased compliance and therefore an increase in collections is what I expect.
So there it is. You heard reactions from various members of the Parliament on the budget presented by Finance Minister today. We also have with us, since most of the members were also speaking about, what the Finance Minister has done vis-a-vis the personal tax regime. We have with us Mr. Ambrish Saha, is partner Deloitte and tax expert as well. Mr. Saha, we would like to start with a very simple question. If you could explain to our viewers, what is it that they have got in the budget when we talk about the personal tax, direct tax rather?
Yeah, so I think clearly, any income up to 15 lakh rupees, is something that individuals have benefited because of the lowering of the tax rate and the moving of the slabs. So if I were to look at a lower end, at 9 lakhs assume, I think there is a 15,000 rupees saving. And if I move right up to, the 15 lakh area, then the, tax saving moves up to almost 37,500 rupees. So every individual in that level up to 15 lakhs has got benefited from this. But I think the benefit will also go at the higher levels because the surcharge rate has been dropped significantly by 1/3 from 37.5 to 25. So income brackets above 5 crores or about 2 crores will also get benefit because of this surcharge rate drop. So I think it's at both ends of the spectrum. From a personal tax perspective.
But Mr. Saha, the key point here is that this is under the new tax regime. So is this also an indication that the government is making a subtle push towards the new tax regime as well? Because no such relief in the old tax regime.
Absolutely. I think, when the new regime came, I think there was a gentle push. This makes it even more profound in terms of the push. And I hope that, with this, there will be more and more individuals who will move to the new regime because of the benefits that it will give.
बिल्कुल, तो हम कह सकते हैं फेज वाइज हटाने के लिए जो ओल्ड टैक्स रिजीम है, कहीं ना कहीं न्यू टैक्स रिजीम को थोड़ा आकर्षक बनाने की कोशिश की गई है। और कहीं ना कहीं इसके अलावा अगर सैलरीड क्लास की बात कर रहे हैं और पेंशन भोगियों की बात करें हम अमरीश जी, तो इसके लिए न्यू टैक्स रिजीम में स्टैंडर्ड डिडक्शन के लाभ को भी बढ़ाया गया है। सीनियर सिटीजन्स को कितना लाभ होगा इससे?
सो आई थिंक इससे जो है, बिकॉज ये स्टैंडर्ड डिडक्शन बढ़ गया है, तो उससे 52,500 तक उनको लेके गए हैं, जो न्यू रेजिम में जो पहले नहीं था। तो आई थिंक उसके ऊपर भी उनको अगर आप 15% भी एवरेज टैक्स रेट गिन लीजिए तो और 7,500 रुपया करीबन उनको लाभ मिल जाएगा।
और जो इनकम टैक्स स्लैब की संख्या 7 से घटाकर 6 की गई है, इसका कितना बड़ा फर्क पड़ेगा?
सॉरी, वापस जरा आइए, आई कुड नॉट हियर यू।
जो स्लैब की संख्या है इनकम टैक्स में पहले 7 थी, जिसे अब कम करके 6 कर दिया गया है, तो ये किस तरह का असर है, कदम क्यों उठाया गया है?
तो इससे क्या होगा कि जिसकी इनकम लेट्स से 7 लाख है, 8 लाख है, 9 लाख है, उनको ज्यादा फायदा होगा। जैसे आप 15 लाख की तरफ जा रहे हो, आपका एवरेज टैक्स थोड़ा बढ़ते जाएगा। 15 लाख के ऊपर कोई चेंज नहीं है। तो आई थिंक इट इज एन इम्पोर्टेंट थिंग। जो 5 लाख के ऊपर टैक्स भर रहे थे, अभी वो 7 लाख तक टैक्स नहीं भरना है उनको, तो उनको लिए 0 टैक्स हो गया। 7 लाख से 15 लाख के लिए आपको बेनिफिट हो गया ओवरऑल। तो दोनों हिसाब से आप देखो तो 15 लाख तक जिसकी इनकम है उनको बहुत ज्यादा बेनिफिट हो रहा है।
So a comparative analysis, Mr. Saha, before we let you go, for the viewers to understand, is it still a better option, the new tax regime, after these changes made in the budget for the average taxpayer up to that particular level, say around up till 15 lakh, vis-a-vis the old tax regime we're talking about?
I think it will depend on each individual and their particular fact pattern. तो उनको दोनों कैलकुलेट करना ही पड़ेगा देखने के लिए कि कौन सा उनके लिए बेहतर है, बिकॉज वो पुराने में कोई डिडक्शंस मिलते हैं जो नए में नहीं मिल रहे हैं, और उन्होंने ये टाइम बहुत डिडक्शंस भी निकाल दिए हैं, जैसे कि प्रोविडेंट फंड, इंश्योरेंस प्रीमियम, वो निकाल दिए हैं। तो मेरे हिसाब से नया रेजिम बेटर ही रहेगा।
Okay. So clearly a subtle move towards the new tax regime as Preeti looks like
और एक नया फॉर्म अब पूरी तरह से होगा। एक जो मिडिल क्लास को राहत की बात कही जा रही थी, बहुत लंबा इंतजार रहा। हालांकि सरकार ये समझाती रही कि डायरेक्टली टैक्स में हम कोई रिबेट को इंक्रीज नहीं कर रहे, लेकिन इनडायरेक्टली हम आम आदमी को फायदा दे रहे हैं। कितनी बड़ी राहत है।
स्टैंडर्ड डिडक्शन भी बढ़ा दिया है, और मतलब जो टैक्सेबल इनकम है उसको भी 5 लाख से 7 लाख कर दिया है। मतलब एक जो डायरेक्शन है वो क्लियर है कि आपको नए टैक्स रेजिम की तरफ चलना चाहिए, क्योंकि जो डिडक्शन और इंसेंटिव थे पहले, उससे पेपर वर्क ही बढ़ता था। मतलब आप इंश्योरेंस ले रहे हैं या वो कहीं और इन्वेस्ट कर रहे हैं, उसका कोई मतलब सरकार को कोई लाभ नहीं होता था, तो उसको सरकार उस पूरी सिस्टम को हटाना चाहती है और चाहती है कि आप नए टैक्स regime में ही आ जाए.
But how will this impact the savings part, you know, because to claim deductions, the income tax paying, most of them used to save just to claim deductions.
So yeah, so one saving was that you were investing in insurance, you know. So now that is the thing that you should not invest in insurance for saving. Insurance is a risk product.
It's not a saving instrument.
It's not a saving instrument. Neither is it an investment instrument. It's a risk instrument. So you are investing in it because
इतना जागरूक है हमारा.
अब ये तो फाइनेंशियल लिटरेसी होनी चाहिए, क्योंकि जब तक आप उसका इंसेंटिव नहीं हटाएंगे तब तक लोग सोचेंगे कि यार हाँ इसमें तो पैसे बनते हैं हमारे, तो पैसे बनने का कोई तरीका नहीं है उसमें. इंश्योरेंस में तो मतलब ये गलत चीज़ थी कि उससे पैसे निकालते थे लोग, बोनस देते थे, वो सब चीज़ें नहीं होनी चाहिए इंश्योरेंस में.
Okay. We'll come back to this part again. Mr. R. Dinesh, President Designate CII is with us. Mr. Dinesh, welcome to Sansad Television. We were just now talking about the tax structure, of course, the direct tax structure, person taxes, but there is a lot of relief which has come to the HNIs as well in terms of, rationalization of taxation rates there. So that aspect, how will that impact? And it's not just about the HNIs, when we look at the industry also, there seems to be a lot of measures which have been taken place.
Yes, thank you. And I think it's, I would call it a very well balanced approach. So it's very inclusive, make sure that I would call it required sectors are taken care of. And I think what you said is very correct. This actually will spur growth in two ways. So I call it as a virtuous cycle. In fact, I think the finance minister mentioned that. On one side, you have the focus on infrastructure and the capex which goes with it. And on the second, you have more money being available to be able to spend. So you have domestic consumption going up, and on the other side, you have money coming in thanks to the capex which is taking place. So I would call it as a very pro-growth budget which benefits all sections of society, so therefore inclusive, and also offers an opportunity for higher job creation because of the infrastructure spending, the capex being taking place.
Okay. So you spoke about infrastructure spending and that higher, capital expenditure there. Focus on urban infrastructure there, it looks like, and then larger, not only just larger projects as well. There seems to be a lot of impetus to MSMEs also. So the entire, system needs to move in tandem.
Yes, I think this has been also one of the requirements or asked from an industry perspective, especially considering that during the COVID period and post, I think there have been, I would call it, significant strain on the MSMEs and also the smaller businesses. So I think there are two aspects to that. One is the fact that the Vishwas scheme which has been introduced, which allows them to be able to get the monies back very quickly. But more importantly, if you look at the focus, it is not just on, I would call it, the tier 1 cities. It has been very clearly mentioned that including for the state funding, it is going to be focused on the tier 2 cities, and wherever the state government is going to spend, the backup has also been given, especially for the municipal bonds and other urban bodies. So my view is this is giving a rare opportunity for the smaller businesses which are present in rural markets, which have had issues of making sure of being able to do business with the government, being protected, and having a one-time benefit wherever they have had issues thanks to COVID.
Okay.
So I think this does pave the way for them to have I would call it quick growth, and also make sure they're able to realize the reduce faster. Last point I want to mention there, not just from MSME's perspective, but as industry, is that as I mentioned, the capex-led growth is not, these are all not projects which are taking place only in urban areas. If you look at the 50 key infrastructure projects which the finance minister mentioned about, which will be fast-tracked and followed through, that itself are areas which are mostly in the outlying areas of the country. So the first mile, last mile point which the finance minister mentioned, and the fact that the support to the state governments and the infrastructure support to rural areas I think will mean much better times for the MSMEs. And I think one other factor I have to mention is the ease of doing business point.
Okay.
So the focus on not just rationalizing the laws, but also removing the decriminalization or making it not draconian in nature is something which has been again an ask for the small scale sector. So these three coming together, I would say, helps position the country and the small scale sector to able to come back to their growth and kind of get to the growth path.
Okay, Mr. Dinesh, one more aspect, before we let you go, and that is also very important for us to understand that do you believe that the rejig which has been done in the customs duty regime of various commodities and products as well is enough to give that required push to domestic manufacturing, or something else might also be required along the way?
No, I think there are two elements to this. I mean, I would not look at the customs duty rejig as a standalone action, right? The focus is on making sure that manufacturing for the globe takes place in India, and obviously there will also be domestic consumption taking place. So if I look at that as the base, I think the fact that the PLI schemes have been introduced, that there is focus on making sure that the manufacturing shifts to India, and then if you overlay that with the specific exemptions which have been given, and I don't know the full details of it because I have to go through the budget in detail to be able to arrive at that, but at least from a prima facie reading of it, they are all specific asks for reduction in duties which enable Indian manufacturing to become more competitive for us to become part of the global supply chain. So if I overlay these two together, that is the PLI focused manufacturing to become India to become a hub for global exports, and on top of that have these specific exemptions put together, then I think it enables manufacturing in India to be more focused. But I would also have to mention the focus on the green hydrogen focus, as well as the support for the, I would call it, green vehicles and green support systems for batteries. So all of it together, if you look at it, I think it's not, I don't want to call it as customs duty exemptions. I would call it as part of an overall package for making Indian manufacturing more competitive and also to be able to part of the global supply chain.
Okay.
विशाल, इस समय हमारे साथ विनीत अग्रवाल भी जुड़ गए हैं, उनका भी रिएक्शन लेते हैं। इमीडिएट पास प्रेसिडेंट है एसोचैम के और मैनेजिंग डायरेक्टर है ट्रांसपोर्ट कॉरपोरेशन ऑफ इंडिया लिमिटेड के। विनीत जी, आपकी क्या प्रतिक्रिया बजट को लेकर? तमाम जो सकारात्मक संकेत, और ख़ास तौर से जब हम मैन्युफैक्चरिंग, एमएसएमई और तमाम और सेक्टर्स की बात कर रहे हैं, तो एक जिन उम्मीद भरी नज़रों से देखा जा रहा था बजट को, कहीं ना कहीं वो पूरा करते दिख रहे हैं। ट्रांसपोर्ट को लेकर एक बहुत बड़ा लिंक है, अगर हम देश की अर्थव्यवस्था और उसके विकास की जब बात करते हैं, ट्रांसपोर्टेशन उसके लिए एक बहुत बड़ा लिंक है। किस तरह से बजट ने उम्मीदें पूरी की हैं?
नमस्कार। ट्रांसपोर्ट और लॉजिस्टिक्स सेक्टर के लिए जो बजट में इस बार एरियाज़ है वो डायरेक्टली कोरिलेट करते हैं टू इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर। जैसे जैसे इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर इम्प्रूव होगा वैसे ही ट्रांसपोर्ट एंड लॉजिस्टिक्स सेक्टर पे भी इम्पैक्ट पड़ता है पॉजिटिवली। तो जो गवर्नमेंट का इंसेंटिव इस साल जो प्लान है कि कम से कम 10 लाख करोड़ या 3.5% ऑफ जीडीपी को हम स्पेंड करेंगे इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर पर, और चाहे ये इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर रिलेटेड टू रोड है या रेल है या इनलैंड वाटरवेज़ है, या जैसे कि एक स्पेसिफिक प्रोजेक्ट के बारे में बात हो रहा है कि 100 लोकेशन से जहाँ एंड टू एंड लॉजिस्टिक्स क्रिएट करना है, पोर्ट से या कोल माइन से या कहीं से, तो ये बहुत ही महत्वपूर्ण रहेगा। अल्टीमेटली एम जो है लॉजिस्टिक्स कॉस्ट को कम करने के लिए।
बिल्कुल। विनीत जी, हम आपके पास आएंगे। एक छोटा सा कमेंट यतीश जी से भी ले लेती हूँ। यतीश, जैसे अभी हमने बात की और कस्टम ड्यूटी को लेकर फिलहाल जो जिक्र अभी विशाल ने भी किया था, ये कितना बड़ा पुश मिलने वाला है? क्योंकि जब मोबाइल, टीवी जब सस्ती हो रही है, इनकी मैन्युफैक्चरिंग को कहीं ना कहीं बढ़ावा मिल रहा है, हम छोटे स्तर पर भी किस तरह से देखेंगे कि काम आगे तेज़ी से बढ़ेगा? और साथ ही जो पेमेंट को लेकर बार बार समस्या आती रही है एमएसएमईज़ के सामने, वो कैसे फ्लो स्मूथ होगा?
तो कस्टम ड्यूटी का अगर आप PLI से लिंक करते हैं और मैन्युफैक्चरिंग इन इंडिया के साथ लिंक करते हैं तो दो तीन एस्पेक्ट हैं उसमें। एक है कि मोबाइल फ़ोन की जो लिथियम आयन बैटरी है उस पर कस्टम ड्यूटी कम की गई है, जैसे कि वो इनपुट मिल सके। दूसरी जगह सरकार ने बैटरी और बैटरी लिंक जो हैं उनको इंसेंटिव दिया गया है लोकल मैन्युफैक्चरिंग के लिए, पंप यूजेज के लिए या स्टोरेज में जितने भी इंस्ट्रूमेंट इक्विपमेंट यूज़ होता है EV में, वो उसको रियायत दी गई है कस्टम्स की। तो मतलब ऑब्जेक्टिव जैसे दिनेश जी कह रहे थे कि कस्टम्स को स्टैंड अलोन नहीं देखना चाहिए। कस्टम एक लीवर है कई लीवरों में जो इकॉनमी में या मैन्युफैक्चरिंग में हेल्प करता है पर यूनिट कॉस्ट को कॉम्पिटिटिव करने में। तो अगर सस्ता माल बाहर से चीन से या कहीं से हिंदुस्तान में आ जाता है तो फिर लोकल मैन्युफैक्चरिंग प्रोड्यूस नहीं हो पाती। तो उसको मैनेज करने के लिए कस्टम्स का एक एज ए लीवर इस्तेमाल किया जाता है, लेकिन उसके साथ आपको इंसेंटिव भी देने पड़ते हैं और एक इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर की तो ज़रूरत होती है। दूसरा प्रश्न आपका मेरे ख्याल से
पेमेंट को लेकर
पेमेंट का। देखिए पेमेंट MSME के लिए एक बहुत ही मतलब प्रॉब्लम एरिया है, शुरू से रहा है। और बड़ी कंपनीज और छोटी कंपनीज में यही अंतर होता है कि उनकी लिक्विडिटी छोटी कंपनी की बड़ी कंपनी की पेमेंट पे डिपेंडेंट होती है। 30 दिन 60 दिन हो जाते हैं, 60 दिन 90 दिन हो जाते हैं और 90 दिन 6 महीने हो जाते हैं। तो इसको सुधारने के लिए सरकार काफ़ी समय से कोशिश कर रही है। एक जो इंटरेस्टिंग मूव जो सरकार ने किया है वो ये है कि जो एक्सपेंसिंग है, अगर आप किसी MSME को पेमेंट कर रहे हैं तो बड़ी कंपनी उसको तब तक एक्सपेंस में नहीं डाल सकती जब तक वो पेमेंट हो नहीं गया हो। तो यानी कि इसकी वजह से ऑडिटर्स पे डायरेक्टली ये एक तरह से रिस्पॉन्सिबिलिटी आ जाएगी कि वो इंश्योर करें कि ये कैश डिसबर्स हो गया है और मिल गया है इस छोटे उत्पादक को, तब तक वो उसको अपने P&L में डाल नहीं पाएंगे।
Okay. Yati ji, I'll come back to you. You know, Mr. Devi Narang is with us. Then he used to go somewhere else. Well, he's FICCI National Executive Committee member also. Let's quickly listen into his viewpoint also. Mr. Narang, when we're trying to understand what the budget has done in the short term and in the long term as well, and how can the industry respond to it, or how will the industry respond to it in terms of investments, in terms of moving along the same lines? How do you see?
So to me, it's a very inclusive budget. It's an excellent budget. It's a consumption-oriented budget. You've seen the outlay which they've done for the infrastructure sector and the tremendous benefits they've given to the renewable energy sector, to which I belong. It is really unimaginable. They have touched every sector of the economy, including direct taxation, which will lead to consumption. This will place India, make India very competitive, and help us to achieve the net zero target sooner than later and the sustainable development goals. So overall, very positive budget.
Okay. You spoke about renewable energy sector. The Prime Minister in his sum up also referred to various aspects of this budget which are green in the outlook in terms of focus on green energy, and then green hydrogen has been one area where the government has given a lot of impetus. How do you see the green hydrogen policy moving ahead specifically, and various other aspects of the renewable energy, because we have made some commitments and we would definitely like to live up to them?
So let me explain to you, India is dependent upon fossil fuel. Fossil fuel provide base load power. So green hydrogen will replace the fossil fuel by giving us base load power. Secondly, the government has announced a number of incentives for pump storage, which had never been done before. They've announced for battery storage. They've announced 5 million metric tons for 2030 green hydrogen under the green hydrogen mission. The viability gap funding. The biggest thing that they have focused today is on the biomass sector, bioenergy sector, which helps the farmer directly. Secondly, they have done something very innovative, which is getting power from Ladakh, which is another outlay of about 20,700 crores in evacuation and power transmission. Again, this is revolutionary. Green credit, PM Pranam. Then they've talked about mangroves. Now, mangroves, for the audience to understand, if you plant mangroves, they sequester carbon more than the normal trees. Now, if this happens, again, it becomes very interesting because you're reducing the carbon footprint. So all these things, are very positive and will give us very long-term benefit, will create employment. The challenge now is how do we attract $10 trillion into the Indian economy for debt and equity, which is required by renewable energy sector to attain net zero. I think by consistency in policy and by all the states agreeing to what the center has said, and the policies have to be replicated in states. States can't go in one direction by either giving free power or by by having different PPAs. So the PPAs in various states have to also account for let's say in the bioenergy sector, the cost must include the cost of polluting the environment, which is missing at the moment.
Okay, fair enough. Looks like there is a lot of work which needs to be done, but the budget makes it very clear where the focus lies as well. Yatish, before we move along on the other aspects, this renewable energy part and the green energy part, which Mr. Narang was referring to as well. We were also earlier talking about it, how the Prime Minister referred to this, the green part of the budget, our commitments as well. And it's just not about the commitments which we have made on at the international level. It's about our own needs also. And we need to keep adapt with the changing times.
So, I mean, this is, I think, for the first time that you've seen the term green being used in the budget. And the first time that green has taken, different shapes and different connotation in the budget. There is, of course, the hydrogen mission, which we don't know the size of it, but it's expected to be large enough. There is the PM Pranam scheme, which is to be launched, which is again linked to sustainable agriculture and alternative fertilizers. So then there is the biogas thing. There is the Mishti scheme. I don't know whether you got onto that, which is the whole mangrove plantation scheme, which is again not only protecting the the saline water areas, but also converting those places for environmentally friendly spaces, because mangroves are also enormously important for the environment. So I think this is, as the Prime Minister also said, that you're basically laying the foundation for the next 25 years.
Okay.
So the green economy has to be a core part of that foundation, and you cannot expect to survive the next 25 years if you don't not only enable the green economy but also incentivize the green economy. So I think going forward we are going to see possibly during the fiscal year we are going to see more some of these schemes being detailed out, like I mentioned the PM Pranam, and these schemes have to be detailed out.
Indeed.
The hydrogen mission, they have given an overall allocation for it in the for the mission, but they have not talked about how it will work. For the the biomass, of course they have allotted something like 10,000 odd crores. They have also allowed saying that natural farming will be given a boost. Now this has been a stated goal of the party also, that we need to move back to regenerative farming. We need to move away from chemical based farming. So they have tried in the past to enable this, but I hope we'll see more details going forward.
Okay.
The one point which I wanted to kind of touch upon, which one of your speakers said, so there is a shift with the RIDF, the Rural Infrastructure Development Fund.
Yes.
If you know that this fund, as it is called, was for the rural sector, the nodal body for this fund was NABARD. Okay. Now they have appointed NHB also for it.
Okay.
So that means that RIDF basically collects all the priority sector lending of commercial banks into a fund, and this fund is basically was still now used only for rural infrastructure, But now it seems that it will be used for urban infrastructure. This is possibly the largest fund, and I mean, there have been in the past questions raised that NABARD has not been very efficient in utilization of this fund. It lapses year to year, because this fund is, at the end of the day, is given to states, and states deploy it downwards. So when it moves to NHBs, the cities will deploy it. So see, some of the issues that we see in our cities, like pollution, for instance, and we want, a city wants to deploy, say, a mechanism to reduce pollution, maybe, aerators, or maybe, cleaning of, planting of trees, or a green belt per se. So that will come from here.
So it further strengthens the local governance.
So this is again the green part and the local
green
governance
part and the local governance as well.
Yeah,
the local unit of the governance will have more funds at the disposal.
At the city level.
At the city level as well.
इस बीच आइए कुछ और रिएक्शंस दिखाते हैं. बीजेपी अध्यक्ष जेपी नड्डा ने बजट पर क्या कहा है, आइए सुनते हैं.
I congratulate Honorable Prime Minister Shri Narendra Modi ji, the Finance Minister Srimati Nirmala Sitharaman ji, and her entire team for this all-inclusive growth-oriented and visionary budget. This budget highlights the core vision of Honorable Prime Minister Narendra Modi ji, as it brings out schemes for the welfare of our brothers and sisters who are at the bottom of the pyramid, as well as for the people placed at the different levels of the pyramid.
Okay, so we have two more guests with us. Preeti, Mr. Sampath Toshniwal is with us, MSME board member with the Government of India, and Mr. A.K. Mattu, former general manager with the RBI, is also with us. Preeti?
बिल्कुल. A.K. मट्टू सर, आपका बहुत बहुत शुक्रिया हमारे साथ जुड़ने के लिए. MSME को फोकस करके अगर हम बात करें तो हमने जाहिर तौर पर जो विकास दर का अनुमान, GDP को लेकर जो अनुमान है, वो हम जानते हैं कि तमाम जो बड़ी अर्थव्यवस्थाएं हैं दुनिया में, उनमें सबसे ज़्यादा है, और इसका एक बहुत बड़ा पिलर MSME सेक्टर रहने वाला है. और कहीं ना कहीं जब वित्त मंत्री ने अपना बजट भाषण दिया तो उन्होंने कहा भी कि MSME हमारी जो इकॉनमी है उसका ग्रोथ इंजन है. MSME को लेकर जो तमाम घोषणाएं हैं, मैं चाहूँगी पहले आप उन्हें लेकर थोड़ा अपना रिएक्शन बताइए. क्या आप मानते हैं कि जिस तरह की उम्मीदें और संभावनाएं जताई जा रही थी और जिस ग्रोथ रेट को लगातार आगे लेकर जाने की बात है, MSME को उतना बड़ा पुश मिलेगा कैसे?
थैंक यू मैडम. ऐसा है कि MSME सेक्टर जो है, इट इज़ नो डाउट इट इज़ वन ऑफ द, आफ्टर एग्रीकल्चर सेक्टर, इट इज़ वन ऑफ द लार्जेस्ट एम्प्लॉयमेंट जनरेशन सेक्टर, and I think it has got a substantial export contribution, more than 40%, और इसमें एम्प्लॉयमेंट काफ़ी एक्सटेंडेड है. तो मैं समझता हूँ कि MSME की कई इसमें पॉजिटिव्स बजट में दिए गए हैं. और जैसे एक फॉर एग्जांपल कोविड अफेक्टेड जो कॉन्ट्रैक्ट्स थे, वो अब जो नहीं ऑनर कर पाए थे, जो उनका अमाउंट फोरफीट हो गया था, 95% उनको वापस मिल जाएगा उस फोरफीचर का. इट ऑल्सो इन्वॉल्व्स आई थिंक अराउंड एन आउटले ऑफ 10,000 करोड़. इट्स ए रिलीफ उनके लिए. वो क्रेडिट गारंटी के लिए न्यू स्कीम आ रही है 1 अप्रैल से 2023 से, जिसमें कि 9,000 करोड़ जो है गवर्नमेंट ने उसका कैपिटल इन्फ्यूजन करना है. It will help MSME to get collateral free advances. Already अभी existing में है, तो it will enhance that practice. तो I think MSME sector overall as a whole के साथ साथ और सेक्टर भी जो है हमारे, जैसे एग्रीकल्चर सेक्टर है, उसको भी अच्छा इसमें बेनिफिट दिया गया है. I think as a whole this is a good budget, जिसने कि लगभग सभी सेक्टर्स को कुछ ना कुछ जो कि कंजम्पशन लेड है, and I feel कि it will create the demand. Actually, for the last after Corona crisis, this COVID crisis followed by the international crisis, the Ukraine-Russia war, there have been substantial disruptions and pressures on the various economies, and India is one of the brightest spot. Every financial institution, every Indian, RBI, Government of India, World Bank, IMF, they have said that this is one of the fastest growing economy. I personally feel कि it will aid employment, that which was a concern, particularly after COVID, which has picked up, but not the way it should have picked up, or the government would like it to get picked up. There are still issues of inflation, and inflation affects each and every one of us. So inflation, though it is coming down, but still it is not within the range of RBI comfort of 4 plus minus 2%. That is 2 to 6% zone that is prescribed. It is still elevated, although this inflation has become a worldwide phenomenon. For example, in case of advanced economies, which had never seen such a high inflation, they are also suffering double-digit inflation like UK
Mr. Mattu, we'll come to the inflation aspect there as well, and how the correlation between inflation and the growth here, and given the geopolitical and geo-economical situations also. But since we started with the MSME, I'd like to take a break here, and I'd like to bring in Mr. Sampath Toshniwal also. He's a member of the MSME board with the Government of India. As Mr. Mattu was also pointing out, and we all heard the Finance Minister in the budget, various initiatives, be it the credit guarantee scheme, push for more money to the MSMEs, relief in terms of Vivad Se Vishwas part, or the ease of doing business as well. What's the rationale? If you can make us understand why so much focus?
बजट भाषण को सुनने के बाद में एक बात स्पष्ट हो जाती है कि अब जो बजट है वो केवल आय व्यय का लेखा जोखा करने या टैक्स की घटत बढ़त करने का माध्यम नहीं है। वास्तव में बजट एक पॉलिसी डॉक्यूमेंट बन चुका है, और इस बजट में एमएसएमई के लिए जो कुछ विशेष प्रावधान मैंने सुने हैं, मैं संक्षेप में आपको बताता हूं। आपने वित्त की बात की, फाइनेंस की। इस बजट में कोलेटरल फ्री लोन के लिए 9,000 करोड़ रुपए का एक एक्स्ट्रा राशि इस पर्पज़ के लिए रखी गई है। जो मैं एमएसएमई बोर्ड का सदस्य होने के अतिरिक्त लघु उद्योग भारती से आता हूं, तो लघु उद्योग भारती की एक प्रमुख डिमांड थी जो हमने बजट से पहले वित्त मंत्री जी को दी थी। इसके अतिरिक्त हमारी एक पिछले कई सालों से थी कि डायरेक्ट टैक्स में कमी की जाए, क्योंकि देश में जितने एमएसएमई हैं उनमें 99% माइक्रो है, और वो माइक्रो अधिकांश जो है प्रोप्राइटरशिप या पार्टनरशिप के अंतर्गत आते हैं। तो इस बार जो डायरेक्ट टैक्सेस में इंडिविजुअल में जो एक काफ़ी चेंजेस किए हैं, बहुत सुधार किए हैं, इसका एमएसएमई सेक्टर को बड़ा फ़ायदा होगा। एक बड़ा लाभ एमएसएमई सेक्टर को मैं ये देख रहा हूँ कि डिलेड पेमेंट जिसकी अक्सर चर्चा होती है, ये एक बड़ा अहम समस्या है एमएसएमई सेक्टर की। इस बार ये इसमें स्पष्ट कर दिया गया है कि अगर नियत समय में 45 दिन की अवधि में अगर वो पीएसयूज या कॉरपोरेट सेक्टर या दूसरे डिपार्टमेंट्स अगर पेमेंट नहीं करते हैं, तो वो उनका जो है उनको उसका एक्सपेंस अलाउ नहीं होगा। मैं समझता हूँ कि ये एक बहुत बड़ा परिवर्तन है जो डिलेड पेमेंट की समस्या को बहुत हद तक हल करेगा। इसके अतिरिक्त कस्टम ड्यूटी में जो एक उसका स्ट्रक्चर में चेंज किया गया है, वो भी इस बात को ध्यान में रखकर किया गया है कि उससे एक्सपोर्ट बढ़े और प्रोडक्शन बढ़े, मैन्युफैक्चरिंग बढ़े, क्योंकि बहुत सारे कैपिटल गुड्स एमएसएमई को भी बाहर से मंगाने पड़ते हैं, तो उन पर काफ़ी रैशनलाइज किया गया है कस्टम ड्यूटी को। एक बहुत बड़ी बात है जो विवाद से विश्वास की स्कीम है, जिसका पार्ट 2 आज हमारे सामने आया है, जिसके अंतर्गत 100 जॉइंट कमिश्नर्स की नियुक्ति की गई है, उसका प्रावधान किया गया है जो छोटे व्यापारियों की अपील पे ध्यान देंगे। इसका बड़ा लाभ होने वाला है। इसके अतिरिक्त एक जो कंप्लायंस बर्डन की अगर हम बात करें, अनुपालना का जो बोझ एक छोटे व्यापारी पर एमएसएमई के ऊपर आता है, तो केवाईसी नॉर्म्स को बहुत सरल किया गया है, और जन विश्वास विधेयक की चर्चा पूरे जोर शोर से की गई है, जिसके अंतर्गत 42 कानूनों के बारे में जो अनावश्यक प्रावधान को हटाने की बात है। और विवाद से विश्वास की जो मैं चर्चा कर रहा था, उसमें निश्चित रूप से ऐसा लगता है कि सरकार छोटे व्यापारी पर विश्वास करने जा रही है, एमएसएमई पर। तो ये कुछ मुझे प्रमुख प्रावधान लगे आज के भाषण में, बजट भाषण में एमएसएमई के प्रति।
बिल्कुल, एमएसएमई पर हम वापस आएंगे। हमारे साथ मिस्टर आयुष लोहिया इस समय जुड़े हुए हैं, जो कि सीईओ हैं लोहिया ऑटो इंडस्ट्रीज़ के। बहुत बहुत स्वागत है आपका मिस्टर लोहिया, हमारे साथ चर्चा में जुड़ने के लिए आपका शुक्रिया। क्या मिला ऑटो सेक्टर को सीधे तौर पर बजट से? जो उम्मीदें थी, क्या कुछ हासिल हुआ? हम जब क्लीन एनर्जी की भी बात कर रहे हैं, ग्रीन एनर्जी की बात कर रहे हैं, ईवी पर खासा जोर रहा है, हाल के सालों में हमने देखा भी है। स्क्रैप पॉलिसी लेकर सरकार आई थी। कुल मिलाकर ऑटो सेक्टर को जो उम्मीदें थी बजट से, क्या कुछ हासिल हुआ?
तो डेफिनेटली ये बजट में देखते हैं ऑटो सेक्टर के लिए ख़ास बात पे गवर्नमेंट ने स्पेशली अनाउंस किया है, जहां पे वो जितनी भी गवर्नमेंट की व्हीकल्स हैं उन्हें रिप्लेस करेंगे विद न्यू व्हीकल्स, तो इससे बहुत बड़ा पुश होगा ऑटोमोटिव सेक्टर को। उसके अलावा गवर्नमेंट ने जो मशीनरी इंपोर्ट लिथियम आयन बैटरी के पैक्स बनाने के लिए या उसकी मशीनरी है उसके ऊपर कस्टम ड्यूटी काफ़ी कम कर दी है, उससे बहुत बेनिफिट होगा। तीसरा, अगर हम देखा जाए तो एक सबसे इम्पोर्टेंट आस्पेक्ट्स या आस्किंग थी हमारी गवर्नमेंट से इस फाइनेंस बजट में कि जो इलेक्ट्रिक व्हीकल्स हैं उसे प्रायोरिटी लैंडिंग में कवर की जाएगी। वो एक चीज़ अभी तक सामने नहीं आई है। बाकी जब डिटेल बजट आएगा तो उसमें और पता लगेगा कि कैसा सिनेरियो रहते हैं। तो ये दो एस्पेक्ट सबसे इम्पोर्टेंट हैं जो इस बजट में बात की गई है, और डेफिनेटली को बहुत प्रोत्साहन मिलेगा, नए व्हीकल्स रिप्लेस होंगे, और साथ के साथ स्क्रैपिंग पॉलिसी के ऊपर अलग से बजटिंग की गई है, जिससे बहुत ज़्यादा प्रोत्साहन मिलेगा कि रिप्लेसमेंट ऑफ ओल्ड पोल्यूटिंग व्हीकल्स की जगह न्यू व्हीकल्स ऑन रोड आएंगे। और जिस हिसाब से इलेक्ट्रिक व्हीकल की पेनिट्रेशन बढ़ रही है, मेरे को लगता है स्क्रैपिंग पॉलिसी से इलेक्ट्रिक व्हीकल को बहुत ज़्यादा बेनिफिट होने वाला है।
बिल्कुल मिस्टर लोहिया, हम आपके पास दोबारा रुक करेंगे। इसके अलावा संपत जी, जो आपने बड़े पॉइंट्स अभी हमें एमएसएमई को लेकर बताए हैं, इसमें जो महामारी से प्रभावित एमएसएमई है उनको राहत देने के लिए कुछ कदमों की घोषणा है। ये कितना बड़ा आप कदम मान रहे हैं बजट में?
देखिए, हमें ये मानकर चलना चाहिए कि महामारी का जो प्रभाव था उससे हमारी अर्थव्यवस्था और एमएसएमई सेक्टर भी बहुत हद तक अब उभर कर बाहर आ चुका है। और जिनको आवश्यकता है उनके लिए, जैसा मैंने पहले कहा कि 9,000 करोड़ रुपए का जो एक्स्ट्रा प्रावधान किया गया है, और पहले से जो चली आ रही स्कीम है उनमें भी टैक्स रेट में भी कमी की गई है, तो फाइनेंशियल दृष्टि से ये ठीक है। लेकिन आज के बजट में हम एक बात, हमने कल जो बजट पूर्व सर्वेक्षण सुना आर्थिक, उसमें भी ये बात देखी गई कि कोविड, यूक्रेन संकट और जो यूएस का फेड सिस्टम है, इन सब कारणों के बावजूद भी हमारे देश की जो विकास दर है वो आज की तारीख में दुनिया में सबसे ज़्यादा है। तो इसको देखते हुए मुझे लगता है कि इसका एक बड़ा कारण है कि कैपिटल एक्सपेंडिचर सरकार का पीछे बहुत रहा है। और आज के बजट में सबसे बड़ी बात जो है मुझे नज़र आई कि वित्त मंत्री जी ने स्पष्ट किया कि कैपिटल एक्सपेंडिचर को हम 33% बढ़ा रहे हैं, जो जीडीपी का 3.3% होता है। ये इससे ओवरऑल एमएसएमई सेक्टर को और पूरी अर्थव्यवस्था को बहुत बड़ा फायदा होने वाला है। तो इसके, और जो सप्तऋषि एक टाइटल के अंतर्गत बजट भाषण की शुरुआत में जो 7 ग्रुप में पूरे बजट भाषण को देखा जाए तो उन्होंने डिवाइड कर दिया था जी। वो सारे के सारे जो है, जैसे इंक्लूसिव ग्रोथ है, इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर डेवलपमेंट है, ग्रीन ग्रोथ है, गवर्नेंस फोकस है, यूथ के ऊपर फोकस है, एग्री डिजिटल इंफ्रा है और फाइनेंशियल एम्पावरमेंट है। ये सारे सप्तऋषि जो योजनाएं हैं, ये मैं तो समझता हूं कि भारत के एक आत्मनिर्भर भारत के उसका एक भावी रोड मैप है जी। इसका एमएसएमई सेक्टर को निश्चित रूप से डायरेक्ट इनडायरेक्ट पर्याप्त फायदा होने वाला है
जी जी। we'd like to bring in Mr. Mattu here. Mr. Mattu, you were earlier talking about the issue of inflation and how that is very, very important. Global aspects as well, when we are looking at the geopolitical situations, which Mr. Toshniwal also referred to, geo-economical situation as well. There are fears of recession in various, large economies also. So in those conditions, and then we analyze what is the roadmap which our government has put in place with this budget, not only for this year, but for the long term as well. How do you see we managing those risks and challenges which we might face from the global headwinds?
See, the RBI roadmap as mandated by the government of India, as I have already stated, it is around 4% plus minus 2%. They have to remain within this band. But unfortunately, the COVID impact, post-COVID or during the COVID, these industrial or manufacturing activities, services activity, all sections of the society or economic sections, they got affected. Followed by now international uncertainties, commodity and fuel prices. If you see petroleum products, how increasingly they shot up to even 138. And followed by, this Ukraine and Russian crisis, which added to the food grains also. See, it extended to food grain, inflation also. Recently, Government of India has, they released another 30 lakh ton of wheat, which has cooled down the prices of wheat by 5 to 7 rupees. My point is, global headwinds are bound to be there and they will definitely impact, but RBI has, and Government of India, and as Mr. Sampath Kumar was saying, this capex-led budget, whether it was last year, Honorable Finance Minister had told, 7.5 lakh crore of capex was envisaged, together with 3 lakh crore additionally, which were the grants for the state, capital budget, and total it went it totaled around to 10.5 lakh crores. Okay. So the Honorable Finance Minister had last year budget had stated that it will have a multiplier impact of 2.95 times. Number one. Number two, when the government is committed to create infrastructure, private sector also wishes to join in. Healthier balance sheet of the private sector, including the banks. So they are now in a position to crowd in, this private sector will also be facilitated to crowd in investment in the, capex cycle. Okay. And I'm sure it's bound to increase. And it is the private sector that also creates a lot of jobs if capital capex cycle picks up. So regarding the second question, IMF has, tentatively, in the recent forecast has expected the inflation to come down to around 5% in 2024 and maybe up to 4% a year later. At the present time, the inflation was I think around 8% in April, which has cooled down to below 6. So that way, I think, or it's slightly elevated beyond 6. So the idea, over a period of time, the inflation is bound to cool down, and this increase in this consumption, shock which this budget has given, it will also, along with the capex, it will also create more jobs. It will leave disposable income at the hands of the people. The one concern here I would like to say unemployment, which has also the rate of unemployment has come down from the earlier peak level. So I think overall, if this Ukraine and Russia war, if it doesn't escalate, or Iran and other Middle East issue, they don't flare up as we see. So maybe that India will be able to manage inflation also very well because of our internal strengths. Okay. But one more larger challenge, Mr. Mathu, which remains for the finance minister and which mentioned also in her budget speech is to maintain fiscal prudence. So far, it has been done in a very positive way. Some tough targets you see has been put by her for the government in terms of the fiscal deficit at a particular level and also in the future also. How do you see government trying to maintain that fiscal prudence levels, specifically when we are dealing with these global headwinds as well, and we have to also ensure that our economy grows at a larger pace than what it has been doing? You see, one thing I would say that the government's move during the last 7 years, this additional excise duty on petrol and diesel, it has given a government a very good headroom. They have been able to generate around 24 lakh crore additional resources during this last during the last 7 years. You see, at the time of in 2014, when this duty was, this revenue on fuel was around 1.92 lakh crore. It has risen to 4.72 lakh crore during the current year, approximately. So my point is that government still continues to levy, although they have reduced the additional excise. Still, the petrol is having 19.80 and 15.670 excise duty, as against 9 rupees 80 paisa in 2014 and 3 rupees and 360 paisa on diesel. So still government continues to mop up sufficient resources. So this is one thing. Another thing is that government has the buoyancy in tax revenues. If you see GST collection, I mean the month which we ended yesterday, they have been able to collect 1.55 lakh crore.
And those are very significant numbers.
They are indeed. If this trend continues during next year, I am sure you work out it will be around 20 lakh crore. So government has luckily managed its finances very well by persuasion, by effective implementation of tax laws, by plugging the loopholes, and also see that the slippages do not take place in the taxation structure. Similarly, you see the personal tax, income tax, corporate tax, all have been they have added to the kitty of the government beyond budget what was expected at the time of last year's budget.
Okay.
And I think this growth will continue.
Okay. So thank you so much, Mr. Mattu. Yatish, I'd like to take it from where Mr. Mattu left before we come back to specific sectors, because this is really interesting. We've been talking about since morning how this year's budget focuses on various sectors, various segments of the population as well, and a forward-looking budget also. But all this can happen when the government has that elbow room, that maneuvering room. And that maneuvering room comes with fiscal prudence. So this is all falling in place. Do you agree?
You see, one of the things that this government has been able to maintain, and that's partly due to the tax buoyancy that it has had both on the GST side and, as Mr. Mattu was pointing out, on the fuel side. Though fuel has contributed to inflation, the government has been strong enough not to reduce its tax revenues from there. So this has allowed them not just the wriggle room, it has allowed them the cushion to then spend on, capital expenditure. They could not have spent 10 lakh crores on capital if they didn't have this kind of buoyancy in tax revenues. Now, going forward, as you said, they're projecting a fiscal deficit of 5.9%, and for 2025, they want to maintain the target of bringing it down to 2.5%, which is, again based on this assumption that we would have crossed the election year in 2024, and the economy would be in a better situation, and we would have possibly have the government would have a much more better revenues with them, so they would be able to afford a lower fiscal deficit, which is from 5.9% to bringing it down to 2.5% is almost like halving it, so to say. So this continuity that and this strictness or rigor that the finance ministry has adopted gives a lot of stability to both the rating agency internationally and also investors and foreign banks, because they then believe what is being said. They believe that this would this kind of roadmap will be maintained by the government. It's not political talk, but it is a number that they will meet. So this is I think a change from before that. Earlier fiscal deficit targets were given but rarely met. Revenue targets were given but rarely achieved. Expenditure targets were given, but they were either falling short of it because departments or government could not expend them, or they would expend them in the last quarter of the year, clubbing all investment. So the efficiency of the government is always measured by its ability not just to collect tax revenues but also to how does it spend those tax revenues. And when you're spending tax revenues on multipliers like capital expenditure, then you know that the buoyancy in tax revenue will at least remain for the foreseeable future. So that's the fundamental shift or change that the structure of the budget has done over the last.
देखना होगा कि जो फिस्कल डेफिसिट को लेकर जो मानक तय किए गए हैं उसके अंदर ही क्या हम अपने